Welcome to Beyond Spend, the podcast where we explore the future of travel and expense management, accounts payable, and payments. We're bringing you the latest insights to help simplify your operations, optimize spend, and drive growth. Get ready for what's next.
So guys, thanks for participating. This is the very first Mburst podcast series. And the first one being, the application of artificial intelligence to travel and expense. It's a pretty hot topic and one that I'm pretty excited about. Before we get started, though, I've been asked to mention a couple of future events that are coming up. So there's a travel snapshot webinar that's coming up, and it's all happening on December 10th, where we cover trends around corporate travel managers' needs for 2025. Basically what this is we look at all the data that we have, we come up with a bunch of stats and metrics, we try to forecast what hotel and air rates are going to do, all that kind of fun stuff. So that's a good one for buyers. Another one is an in-person event. Mburst is having what's called Mburst in Motion. It's May 20th through the 22nd. It's for Mburst customers as well as prospects. It's all happening in Nashville, Tennessee. It's a 3-day event. It should be a pretty exciting thing. So anyway, I've done my job. All right. So let's start off with some introductions here. Guys, thanks for participating. Eric, I know it's bright and early. And where are you? In Seattle?
In Seattle, right? Yes. The bomb cyclone just hit here a couple days ago, and it's dark in November here.
Well, Eric, can you do a little bit of intro for anyone that doesn't know, which probably is very few, but there might be one or two listening to this thing that don't know Eric Bailey. So
I actually just sort of I call it semi-retired from Microsoft after about 20 years. And when I was there, I led the global travel program as long as the payment, the card program, and the venue sourcing. So I've been managing those teams for quite a few years there. Saw a lot of new technologies. We worked. We're one of the earlier adopters of TripBam and Roadmap, which are now both Mburst family members. And then I left last month, and now I am going to be doing a little bit of advising for some companies and trying to enjoy a little bit more time. Not working in a large corporation. Let's call it that.
Yeah. Good for you. And so you're a current Hall of Famer for Business Travel News. And can you give a little bit about the Microsoft program, size, scope, I don't know, just for perspective?
Yeah. It was, is. I still can't quite figure out when to use is and was or mine and theirs and things like that. So you'll hear me screwing up and going back and forth between those. But 120 plus countries, 180,000 employees. The travel had reduced quite a bit from pre-COVID. It used to be about 3,000 to 5,000 trips a day, down to about 1,000 to 2,000 trips a day. And so I think that a lot of that was, there's a lot of dollars in that going between that, right? You're talking hundreds of millions of dollars of savings, but also a lot of use of technology. Right? How do you connect people together without maybe having them travel? And then another area that was huge, I started working in the sustainability area starting in like 2008 or so, which was pretty early before it was kind of the big buzzword. And that was looking at trying to get hotels that are a little greener, more efficient flights. We did a lot of SAF purchases, many millions of dollars of SAF purchases. Just anything we could do to start moving that needle, and there's still a long ways to go on it.
Yeah. You guys were early on the sustainability track. I remember that. And doing some pretty advanced stuff. All right. Well, thanks for that intro.
Yeah.
Ken, so you're currently, is it CIO or CTO? I get confused.
CTO, Chief Technology Officer of Mburst.
Yeah. And you've been with Mburst now for several months. So welcome to the family. Can you give your history, background, all that kind of fun stuff for perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Steve. So I'm Chief Technology Officer in Mburst. I look after everything technology, our end-to-end engineering, platform operations, how we deliver our services, all of our corporate IT, business systems, information security. So everything under that umbrella. I grew up as a software engineer. and spent a lot of time in infrastructure, software, data protection, storage, virtual infrastructure, and have evolved from there into some large-scale SaaS leadership roles, and that's what leads me to Emburse. So I'm a technologist at heart. I am an engineer. I consider myself a builder. So topics like AI are just things that I really get excited about, and excited to really talk about this here today.
All right, good. Thanks for that.
And again, I'll just add in, I don't envy your position, because just seeing the big acquisitions that Microsoft used to do, it's not a single technology stack that you're working on, right? You've got all these different technologies coming in with new acquisitions and things like that, I suppose.
That's absolutely right, Eric. I mean, Emburse is about a dozen different companies that have come together under the umbrella, both travel, expense management, invoice and AP payments. So we've got a broad portfolio, and a lot of that is inorganic, and that comes with very different tech stacks, very different technologies, and making that all mesh together is certainly a challenge. But as an engineer, I relish some of those challenges as well.
Challenge, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Ken's got a big job. Let's put it that way. Anyway, so the topic that we're kind of starting this podcast off with is, as I mentioned, AI. And so I think just for folks listening in, we need to level set kind of what AI is. So can you give kind of a high level, what the heck is AI and why should I care about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do that. So, we could spend the entire podcast talking about just what AI is.
Right.
I'll keep it brief and try to keep it simple for everyone here. So, AI has been around for a long, long time. I mean, I've been in the industry almost for 30 years now, and I remember in university taking classes on AI. It was obviously very different from what it is today. But I would say there is obviously a lot of hype around AI and the ability to leverage AI. What I would say is, the recent hype is really around generative AI, and that is, as the name indicates, the ability to generate some sort of content that could be text, could be video, sound, could be an image, but it generates something, and it does so by sort of using like human cognition. And so, the reason there's so much hype here is the possibilities of what it brings. And I'd say probably just about 2 years ago, it was sort of mid to late 2022 when OpenAI came up with GPT-3. That was sort of the inflection point in the industry where, okay, this is not just a science project anymore. This is actually something that most people, companies, etc., can leverage and actually leverage for good and get things done. And what I would say is there's been a lot of learning over the last couple of years in terms of what AI can really do and what maybe it's not so good at. The type of AI that's been around a long time has been machine learning. That's something I've used in my career for a long, long time. And that is just sort of building models that are very specific to a narrow use case, whereas generative AI is very broad. You can use it. You can ask a chatbot or a chat interface almost any question. It will come back with some kind of an answer. Hopefully, it's an appropriate answer. But the possibilities there are increasing productivity, efficiency. I think we've learned generative AI in particular is very, very good at consuming large amounts of data, making sense of that data, summarizing that data, generating content, improving, doing things like tasks, executing sort of some remedial tasks that will make knowledge workers incredibly effective. And so that's why, AI is such a hot topic, is that there is a lot of promise. And you see it in the market. NVIDIA just announced their earnings this week, and they said, hey, the age of AI is here. And we'll talk more about what has worked and what hasn't worked. But I think picking and choosing where to leverage AI and how to use it, that's been something that's evolved over the last couple of years, as I said, when we hit that inflection point.
Yeah. It kind of feels like I don't know, something happened, a year or so ago to kind of push it to the forefront. And to me, it was kind of like this blending of huge amounts of data combined with some incredible new chips and computing power, from NVIDIA. And you smash those two together, and AI was kind of now all of a sudden possible, right? When you put the whole internet, in a box and say, all right, go scan all this and come up with some, responses, whatever, ask questions or whatever, learn from it. That's when kind of the magic seemed to happen. And I think it's just an arms race right now to get the chips, to get the data, to kind of apply it in different areas. Eric, you got any other thoughts on just what AI is?
Yeah, I mean, it's so many different applications and so many different places you can use it that it is hard to pin it down a little bit. And I think that's why people are so excited about it, because it looks like it could almost change everything.
Yeah.
Ken, I mean, to your point, we used some machine learning just on my team, I don't know, 6-7 years ago to create personas, right? To start to look at things that are, what is this person like versus this person like, but in a group of, thousands or hundreds of thousands or whatever. You could kind of understand people a little bit better. And I think that was really interesting then. Figuring out how to make that useful is a different challenge. And I'll give you a great example of where you want AI. And this is where we know agents are great at doing this. If you get a ticket and one ticket is $300 and one is $305, and the $300 ticket is, 14 hours and the $305 ticket is 6 hours, often it'll be like, oh, here's your cheapest one. No, 300 and 305 are the same amount. Right. And so a person is really good at doing that. Computers have not been really good at that. So I think we're going to start to see a lot more of that, where you have just that little logical step that goes in that gives you the results that you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the analogy I always use, it's kind of like when the internet first came out. It was kind of like, is this just a fad or something that's going to be meaningful? And now it's like just everywhere. It's pervasive. It's just a part of your day-to-day lives. And I think AI has the potential to be that. I don't think it's quite there yet, but it feels like one of those things that's coming and one of those things you're going to be using, whether you like it or not. Right.
Yeah. And maybe just to cap this off, what I would say, your point about the internet, I think is a really important one here. Because I think when I think of sort of my career, and I said, over about the last 30 years, I'd say it's the internet, it's cloud computing, and it's AI. Those have been sort of and yes, we're very early in AI and we're just like tip of the iceberg, right. But I truly believe it's here to stay, and we'll figure out over time, and we'll talk more here, how that might evolve.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the other side of this is, the zombie apocalypse prediction, but we'll talk more about that here in a minute. So Eric, you mentioned the $300, 305 problem, whatever.
Yeah.
Have you found some early applications of AI in corporate travel that you think are meaningful, real? What's coming?
Well, I'll give you one now, and this is on the management side of it still, but we can go into the other side maybe, but on the management side of it, I don't know if you've ever looked at survey results and tried to find the verbatims. Well, It's hard to look at 1,000 different comments on something. You can go through and you can kind of read them all, but then you try to pull them together and say, what does this mean? Right? How do I use this to make a decision or to convince somebody else of something? And I don't know if you've used Copilot at all, but I was using Copilot in Excel. And this is one of the first things I used it for. And I just said, show me column J, or create column H that looks at column J and looks for senior executive titles, and then put a yes or no. So just something as simple as that, and boop, like 10 seconds later, you get this output. And now you can say, okay, show me which of these are showing executives and are commenting, hey, I met with the VP, I met with the CEO versus I met with the account manager, right? I mean, you could actually start to sort things out like that really easily. And then the next level, you could say, okay, well, the way I define senior executive is CEO, CTO, you could start to put some of those things in there to make it grow. Because what I did find is there were places where I didn't understand, like managing director might not look the same as CEO. And so you might have to teach it some of those things, which is why, and the pro tip for your kids, if somebody is a AI prompt engineer, apparently that's the hottest job out there now, because you have to ask You have to ask the giant computer in a way that it understands.
Right.
Now, and that'll evolve over time. But just from a management perspective, that was one of those things. It would have been a 3-day project before, and you could get it done in a matter of a few minutes.
So tell me if this is possible. Haven't tried this yet, but based on your survey results example, if I have a blob of text that was given by the person surveyed, and I wanted to know, is this person mad, happy, scale of 1 to 5, whatever, can it interpret that text and come back with they're a 3?
Yeah, I mean, there's some of that. I wouldn't say it's perfect yet, and I think it depends on how you ask the question. If it's total free form, it's going to be harder than if you say, if you give people 3 words. And you notice, have you ever had those surveys where they say, give me 1 word or 2 words that describe how you're feeling about this? It's easier to do it that way than it is with, a full paragraph.
Yeah. Ken, what do you think?
I think it's actually one of the strengths of generative AI at this point is actually to be able to flush out tone and tenor. And even on the flip side, if you, for example, write a blog article or something and say, hey, write this in this tone, like it will actually start to adjust how you write and can present exactly what you said in a slightly different way. It's a real strength of generative AI actually at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was kind of the scary thing when I was playing around with it, is the tone of Dickens, and it would write it in the tone of, how does it know that? Where's that come from? Yeah. But to do that in reverse, I mean, for me, the time it takes is to read all that stuff and say, okay, this guy's, categorize them in a certain bucket. When it starts to do that, that's when I say, holy cow, we just made a big step forward. Yeah. Eric, back on corporate travel though, your tenure at Microsoft, I'm sure you guys were dabbling with AI and looking at it in a lot of different ways. I know with your relationship with Citrix, I guess you could argue their integration with Teams was sort of AI based. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say more where, and there was a little bit of that, and maybe it's the first step. You're trying to create a conversation as opposed to an ask, right? So that if you look at most booking tools, you say, okay, show me this within this window and at this time, which isn't the way you talk to people, right? You would never tell an agent, you know what, I want to fly from Seattle to Dallas, and I want to leave between noon and 6 p.m. You would never, you would say, hey, I've got a meeting till 3, so something after that. And then they would figure out how long it goes to the airport. So I think you're starting to see some of that. On the expense side, we actually did a fair amount of work looking at what the risk of different categories were. And we found that it was 86% of all expenses are zero risk, and 53% of all expense reports are zero risk. So now you have to get that into the tools, you have to get that into the approval processes and the policies, and all those things might take a little bit longer to do. But the fact that we're reviewing zero risk expense reports is ridiculous, right?
Yeah, I agree.
That's something, and hey, everybody's on board with this one. Nobody wants more expense tool work.
Right. Yeah, no, we'll get into expense reports.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, in a big way, because I think that's probably where the real meat of the application is, at least initially. But on the corporate travel side, there's one company I've come across that's kind of out in front, the Skylink, where they're taking, text prompts and then turning that into travel responses. Ken, have you come across any travel AI applications that, of interest?
Yeah, I think, certainly what I would say, and I think some people in the industry are doing this, and there are opportunities across the board, which is, individualized travel preferences. Eric mentioned a few things around scheduling. I mean, there's definitely times when, you get a flight disrupted and you're like, hey, look, I need to figure out my fastest way to get home, which may even be on a different airline if there's weather disruptions or what have you. So I think there's lots of opportunity there. There's also, I think, a great opportunity around negotiation with vendors. Maybe to bring travel and expense together here is, understanding where your expenses are, which vendors they're with, what types of expenses they are, and then being able to surface that. Again, I think AI is really, really good at at chugging through data and really bringing some of that to the surface to give, for us at Emburse, we're selling into the office of the CFO to give those finance professionals the information they need to go target the cost savings that they want. And, travel is a very significant cost item for, any sort of mid to large, enterprise company that's out there. So I think there's lots of opportunity there.
Yeah, no, I somebody told me a stat that roughly 85% of all expenses are travel related, so it's a big chunk, of the spend, but where I see it kind of falling short is it doesn't have access to my personal history. It doesn't know that Steve's going to fly American. He's not going to take a direct flight. He's going to go, he's not going to leave at a 7 a.m. or take a red eye, what have you. It can know corporate policy. You can kind of get that into the responses, but the individuality of it all is what appears to be lacking. And I don't know how you solve that. You have to bring all that kind of PII related data, push it into the model so that it knows, and now you've crossed a line potentially.
Yeah, I think, no question. I think, data governance, data privacy, security of data, that's a huge concern, as it relates to AI. There's been obviously lots of stories that have made it out into the public around this things getting kicked out because these, at the end of the day, these generative AI models, what do? They're just sucking in lots of information, anything they can get their hands on. And that information can always end up coming out because what is it? It's basically, think of the human brain, like you're reading things, you're understanding things, and you spit those things back out at some point. So that is a risk if, based on the information, and there's ways around that with certain information around getting the right contracts and privacy and enterprise models and all that. But you're right, when it starts bridging sort of that personal information with the corporate information and different data sources, that's where it becomes really difficult to sort of piece that together. And I think it represents a fantastic opportunity for the future.
Yeah. So Eric, how did Microsoft manage through, or did you manage through that kind of the balance between personal travel information against, okay, we want to come back with some meaningful responses, but I don't want to cross the line as far as privacy and such?
Yeah, the challenges around the privacy and sort of the AI world are going to be huge. It's not going to be the technology that slows anything down. It is going to be some of those requirements. And I mean, somebody told me, I can't verify it, but that once you put something into AI, it's there forever.
Yeah.
Like if you put your birth date in there, it's there forever. So, I mean, what I think of the trend that I'm seeing is it's going to be a digital ID. Okay. And whether that's around your passport or something else, some sort of form of ID, you're going to have some control over that. Because on the corporate side, we can look at preferences. Now, what you can look at preferences even without looking at the corporate side. If you're in Dallas, I know you probably fly American more than you fly United, right? So there's certain preferences that you can kind of assume with people just based on where they're located or, whatever else it is. If you start looking at all of your credit card charges and things like that, I could start to read in a lot more. But the corporates don't want to touch any of that.
Right.
I would say, at least on the Microsoft side, nobody wanted to know more private information than, nobody wanted to know where you went on your Uber exactly. Nobody wants to track you. There's just information you don't want to see because then you have it and it's hard to get rid of it. So there will be a lot of that, I think, figuring out how do we get that information into the tool without you going in and typing every time you search, well, I want to fly an American. I don't like flying at 7 a.m. You don't want to write a whole paragraph on a search from Dallas to New York, right? Because you know exactly what you want.
You want to say, this is Steve Reynolds. Use my preferences to come back with the right flight, blah, 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 and apply corporate policy. Done.
And there are companies like Neoke, it's Neoke is working on that. I know there's Traveler ID is working on that. Entra, which is the Microsoft thing, is working on that because your ID is everything, right? It is your passport. And if you look, you can now check in. We saw a demo walking through the Hong Kong airport without pulling out your your any sort of ID.
Yeah.
Right? It's all facial recognition and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's
Yeah,
segue a little bit. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I was just going to say to your point, Eric. I made a trip to Toronto this week, and for the first time ever, I didn't actually have to pull out my passport to get through immigration on my way home. They took a picture of my face,
Yep.
which they had taken on their way out, and I literally never took my passport out of my pocket.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know if it's AI related, but definitely airport security seems to be getting better, to your point.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sure there's some AI involved in there somewhere. So let's segue over to expense, because I think that's where the real initial value is going to be. Ken, I know Inverse is doing a lot around the application of AI and expense. Can you talk about kind of the early steps like the OCR and scanning and recognition kind of stuff that you're doing?
Absolutely. So yeah, this is certainly OCR. Our ability to, one of the foundation of what we do at Inverse, whether it's invoicing or expense management, starts with a bill, an invoice, a receipt. And our goal, and this is where AI, one of the main goals of AI is to make people more productive, efficient, and give them time back. This is an area we are focusing a lot on to make that a lot easier and a lot more accurate. So you grab a meal, you snap a picture from your phone, immediately that receipt is being uploaded and analyzed. And we are using AI in this case to be able to break down that receipt and understand who the vendor was, what the tax was, what the individual items were. Your company policy may have a no alcohol policy, the ability to sort of pull that out or flag that, the currency on there, the date and time, these are all this, when we look at a receipt, there's about 50 different items on a receipt that we look for to actually pull out and automatically transcribe that receipt. If you think of what you used to do 5 or 10 years ago with an expense management platform, you'd sort of upload your receipt image, you start manually filling all these things out. It gets really challenging, especially when you're taking a trip, out of country and you've got exchange rates. So what was the exchange rate in that day? And,
Right.
all of that can now be done automatically, saving a ton of time overall. So that's something where that is a huge focus area for us. We've invested a lot of time and energy, and have a data science team that we've built up that is very focused on that. And we're in the process of now rolling out what we're calling our sort of next gen OCR that will leverage AI, both commercial and open source AI on our side.
And what do you think the level of accuracy is going to be? How far can you push it? Are we going to be at 100%? Where do you think it will end up?
Yeah, so we have a lot of data at this point. We've got a data set. Every time that we get a new version of an LLM or anything like that, we run it through a data set that's got about 50,000 receipts in it. So we're getting a fairly large sample size. And what we're seeing is somewhere north of 95%, getting into 98 to 99% for some of the more common countries' currencies. Yeah. Even for some of the foreign currencies and foreign languages, this is an area that we're actually training some of these models. Again, AI is a learning method, right? So you can actually say, hey, here's a receipt. Here's what's on that receipt. Feed it into AI. So you're teaching it actually how to break that down. And we're actually being able to increase, for example, let's say you take a trip to Japan and it's in yen. From somewhere maybe in the mid 80s to somewhere closer to what I mentioned, 95+%, 98% accuracy on those, because we've actually taught it how to do it. And so, that's teaching the model. And obviously the inference comes when you actually have that receipt and you're processing it. But the possibilities are really, really high, and we're excited about, what type of difference this will make for our customers and the ease and the automation of that.
Yeah, I think to your point, I mean, I think you got to have quality data coming in, in order to solve the other downstream problems. Like I want it to be automatically submitted. I want it to be automatically approved. And I can't do that until it reads the receipt correctly, with a real high level of accuracy. So it's kind of a step one, and then 2 and 3 will probably follow pretty closely.
Well, and not like a human would ever take those last 3 lines, that $62.07 is the balance, and just say $62.07 hotel tax. I'm sure none of us have ever done that, right? Just to clear it out and zero it out.
Yeah. So Eric, what is Microsoft doing around expense? And is there any AI application there?
And Microsoft has built their own expense tool leveraging dynamics. And part of that is the complexity of the company. Part of that is you get a bunch of software engineers together and you do that sort of thing. But what I had mentioned before is just on the looking at the risk of each of these different charges. Right now, which you can do if it's on the credit card, it's harder to do outside. But then I guess you can assign different risks to those. But yeah, we found it was 53% of all expense reports there was zero risk associated with.
Yeah.
And that's looking at patterns and looking at sort of all these different, what the vendor, the MCC code, all of that sort of thing.
Yeah. So what you're telling me is 53% should be just fully automated. Don't do anything. It's risk-free. Just send it on through and pay the traveler, and away we go. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And I think it's actually higher than that. If you could apply some additional AI, whatever, to kind of automatically approve this stuff and say, look, I know it's a little bit out of bounds, but because of these other things over here, it kind of makes sense. Let it go.
That number should probably get up to 80%, something like that. Because exactly. I think when you look at it, if somebody charges something and they put it on their own card, well, now it's a 100% faith-based sort of activity. If I just put down $25 for tips, right?
Yeah.
So and it might be totally legitimate, but I think you have to start calculating, okay, on a trip this long and you're going here, does that, if it's going to Germany, that seems really odd because it's not expected. If you're going to New York City, it seems more realistic. So we hadn't gotten to digging into that yet, but I think you'd start getting into those sort of things that people can look at and say, that a human would look at, and you would say, okay, that seems reasonable.
Yeah. Well, don't get me started on tipping. It drives me nuts. It's driving everybody crazy.
Yes.
The sooner we can solve that.
Side note, I once calculated that Microsoft spent about $15 to $20 million on tips.
Yes. I mean, and probably growing every month just because of those point of sale apps. Okay, so let's segue a little bit over to analytics. So as a travel manager, you have a ton of data, sitting out there. You're negotiating with vendors. You're trying to see if policies being adhered, all that kind of stuff. Any thoughts on where AI can be applied to make that part of your job easier?
Well, if you've ever had anybody present anything to you in numbers, there's always something wrong. And I mean, Steve, you know me, I was always kind of the numbers guy, and I always kind of looked for anomalies, and I always felt I was pretty good at that. But I could not believe the number of times somebody would come, and whether this is a supplier or a partner or something like that, and they would say, well, look at this. It looks like by the volume that your car rentals in, Latin America are up by 20%, but your spend is down by 30%. And you're like, that's just wrong. Right. Unless something changed dramatically and there was a huge, currency shift. So I think and we didn't see this yet, but I think you'll start to see that people will look at that and they'll look for that one anomaly that's out there that just doesn't make sense. And it was just because people will just take data and they take it from here and they put it here and they assume that it's correct. And it's almost never correct. And now the question is whether or not you can see the anomalies because they're big enough or not. I'll give you another example that I remember from long ago. You'd always find the most expensive hotels, and they were always in Korea. It's because the conversion rate of the Korean won would show $100,000 instead of 100,000 won or something like that. So you'd never notice that in Europe because it was only off by 10% or 20%. But when it was off by a factor of 100, it was really easy. those are things computers should be better to do than I am, I would say.
Right. Yeah, no. I mean, same problem when we're looking at hotel rates, to your point. We'd get that Korean hotel rate and it would say it's in USD. But we know you didn't pay $100,000 a night for that Korean hotel. But it'd still make its way into the analytics and we wouldn't see it until we're finally about to do a QBR with a client. You're like, that cannot be right. We need to back up.
Hey, we saved you $10 million additional dollars because there were 3 stays in Korea, right?
Exactly right. We'd love to take credit for it, but not quite reality. Ken, you kind of talked about the application of AI to analytics as well. Any additional thoughts there?
Yeah, I'll keep it maybe more general because this is some our products at Emburse we have several different analytics and BI add-ons to our products because at the end of the day, yes, you get the sort of tactical file and expense report, this and that. But when we think of, as I mentioned earlier, we're selling into the office of the CFO and the finance analyst, what they need to understand. And for us, like, the Emburse products, we basically, for customers that are all in with us, we're looking at all of their non-headcount spend for the most part. And, what they're interested in is how can I understand about my spending trends where maybe there's some fat that we can cut, where are there other things? And so, that's really where I think this is a great opportunity because again, AI is really, really good at understanding data and pulling insights out of it, and the ability to really, with AI, to put a dynamic interface onto that, a chat interface, and say, hey, give me all of the car, maybe you mentioned car rentals earlier, like, give me all the car rentals that happened in this country and what is the average price. Like, there's so many different ways you can slice and dice this. It just gives, again, a lot of control in the hands of the people that really need the information.
Yeah. What I'm excited about at Emburse mostly is a couple of things. One is just there's so much data. There's travel that comes through, all the travel products. There's card integration and there's expense data, and you smash it all together. You now have, okay, I've got more insight potentially into going on, but it's a bit overwhelming. And if I could have a tool that sits on top of that to make it simple and easy to ask questions of all this data, that's when I think some pretty exciting things start to happen. The other one is around benchmarking, which is, at Microsoft, okay, in New York, your average rate is, $349.
Right.
So what? Is that good? Is that bad? What are the other tech companies spending in New York, right?
Well, and I think you also add in when you're going, right? As you know, the first week of December is super expensive. The first week of January is not. And so trying to add that in there, those are the kind of insights that I think you want to put in there, is that, do these things make sense? Because one of the things that I worry about with that abundance of data and ease of doing analytics. And I'll give you a good example, and this is pre-AI and all this other stuff. We had a business group that was about 100 million a year of spend. And somebody said, well, I want to see everybody flying first class in there. Okay. And so you got a list of like 10 people that were flying first class. And they're like, okay, well, that's a VP, that, whatever. And then there's one guy that's like, well, what about this guy? Oh, he took 3 trips to Hawaii in first class. And but here's the thing, when he started, he's like, I don't want to travel. I'm never going to travel. If I travel, I'm going first class. And they're like, okay, fine. And he had some business in Hawaii. But so you almost get this like, oh, we're going to find the people doing the wrong thing. And we're going to find them. We're going to, drag them out or whatever. And it's like, 99% of people are doing the right thing because they don't want to get fired. And so you just do the right thing. But you will find this ability of people to sort of drill down and find all these different paths that often aren't showing you maybe the real risk that you thought you were looking for.
Yeah. No, there is a bit of a, needle in the haystack, kind of approach. I want to find the exception, not the kind of the norm, because that's the exciting part. I mean, could it be fraud? Could it be just way out of policy? And okay, how is this guy doing it when he's not allowed to, sort of a thing? Right. Some of that. But to your point, is that a waste of time for that individual to be kind of looking at that granularly? So let's segue a little bit. We've only got a few more minutes here. And so two big questions. So when do you think, Eric, that AI will become just kind of pervasive within a travel manager's job? It's a day-to-day, it's there. You can't get around it.
I mean, I think working with it and, understanding it is today. That I think that you will, the analytics and things like that, we will start doing those things every day.
Yeah.
If you go to a conference and you have, 20 people that you met, instead of writing each of those emails from scratch, Copilot's going to be doing that for you like today.
Yeah, right.
I think you're going to start to see, and on the operational side, you're going to start to see that pretty quickly, like in the next year. Maybe even less, where agents somebody sends an email, and I saw some demos of this, that people could write these up in 45 minutes. So, and this is not, you don't need like a team of engineers working on this stuff for 6 months, but it reads an email and it answers it back automatically because it sees, wait, these questions are a little vague. And when you said you wanted to leave on Thursday or Friday, do you have a particular meeting, right? AI can do all that stuff today really easily. And so I think when you look at the efficiency of the agents, that stuff is going to be kicking in pretty quickly.
Yeah, I can see on the manual agent part where it's going to make their jobs a lot more efficient. And that's probably there today, if not pretty close. But it feels like there's tools sitting on the shelf and we're not quite comfortable using the tools yet. Yeah. Right. They're there. And those that are forward thinking, aggressive, whatever, pick them up and start using them. But there's a lot of folks that aren't yet for whatever reason.
Well, on the booking tool side, for example, I mean, that the different policies that companies have. And there's some people that think that the policy is control spend. And then there's people like me that think the policy has nothing to do. And in fact, I can trick any policy to do anything the longer it is. And then there's sort of budget control. And so as long as you have those people that say, no, I need you to show the lowest fare every time. And they want to show that $300 fare that 0% of people will take instead of the $305 fare that 90% of people will take. Right. Until you have all of those people kind of agreeing on it, I don't think you're going to get those changes as quickly. I think pretty soon you'll probably get to the results will be more of you'll probably want these. However, here's some others that are, that are a little bit less expensive. Yeah. And you'll once people start to see that, they'll be like, I think that the policy control people are going to be like, well, you're right. Why would I tell that of $300 versus $305, right? Of course, $5 I don't care about. And then they'll start to say, well, how about within $50 or $100? So that's when you'll really start to see those changes that I think the travelers will see. But there are these ecosystem sort of resistance points that are going to make that not happen as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And Ken, you got any thoughts on when AI is just going to be the norm?
Yeah, I think.
Well, do you use it every day?
I do. I do use it every day. My engineers, we're a GitHub shop. We use GitHub Copilot. I mentioned earlier about just becoming more efficient, knowledge workers, taking care of some remedial tasks. I mean, there's a lot of coding that developers do that's kind of monotonous that a plugin into your developer IDE can actually just handle for you. We have AI that's built into our pipelines, how code goes from dev to production, and identifies potentially defects in the code, security vulnerabilities before that code gets out. So we're literally using it every single day, and I use it as well to just to make things more efficient. Communications and things like that. It's really, really good at it and saves just a ton of time. But I think in general, putting on my technologist hat and seeing how things have evolved over the last 2 years and maybe looking forward, it was a race for, all software companies to say they're doing AI and do something and, put some things in. They've realized, there's been a realization over the last year and a half that, hey, this is actually pretty expensive. This inference cost is a reason NVIDIA's earnings they're literally the most valuable company in the world, public company in the world, at least. Is that a lot of people are using it, and I think it's expensive, the computing power required to do it. So what I think is going to happen over time here is and it's already started to happen, is that companies are going to start getting more judicious about their use and have a purpose, as opposed to just throwing something out there that says, hey, this is AI, look at this, shiny bell and whistle. That will happen over the course of time. As I said, it's already started. And there was also this hype, I often, in fact, I looked, just the Gartner hype cycle for AI was released just like a week and a half ago. Last time they released it in 2023, generative AI was literally at the peak of, what do they call it, the peak of enlightenment, right? It can do everything. It can solve all the world's problems. It's actually started to come down that slope towards the trough of disillusionment, and so people are now starting to realize, hey, look, this can't do everything. And I've even, the last couple of years, as I've been using AI and implementing AI into products. There's things that generative AI is good for, and there's other use cases that machine learning is good for. And what I think may start, and there's noise about this in the market, and Gartner actually wrote about this too, is composite AI, like taking different types of AI, there's computer vision, there's machine learning, there's generative AI, and actually blending these together to get to a better place, as opposed to like, hey, look, not everything is a nail, so you don't hit it with a hammer. Generative AI is not the hammer that you hit everything with, and that's gonna happen over time.
So, just kind of ending, we've got to wrap it up here. The prediction of the zombie apocalypse, that AI is going to take over our lives. We're going to become just servants to the AI, God out there somewhere telling us what to do and all that. Which, to some extent, look, if AI is out there and it's smart enough to read through all your emails and come up with your to-do list for the day, who am I working for, right? I'm not working for the bot all of a sudden, and there's just a lot of nervousness, whatever, that they need to be regulated, controlled, managed on a global basis to some extent. It's kind of like everybody now has a nuclear warhead. We need to come up with a way some rules to play nice. Any thoughts on that, Eric? You want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, you do have to have rules to play by with this space, because you can generate so much stuff. I mean, everybody has done, a little bit of toying around. Oh, show me a, I sent a picture of something. This is not really travel related, but I showed a friend, look at this really awesome 1970s Audi wagon. Okay. And you could bring and I hadn't done it, but somebody else, he's like, that's the coolest car I've ever seen. It's like, yeah, but it doesn't exist. Right.
Oh, wow.
So at some point, you can create all these things. You can create pictures of people. You can create videos. Yes, it has to be regulated, because otherwise, somebody could recreate this podcast entirely digitally and entirely using AI. And that's a little scary. None of us like that, right? Whether or not it's a full zombie apocalypse, we need to put some sort of guardrails in, I think, for sure.
Yeah. Ken?
Yeah, look, I think it's very, very hard to tell where the technology can take us and whether it can take us all the way to the zombie apocalypse. It is the innovation in generative AI in particular is so rapid. It's more rapid, I think, than anything we've seen in a long, long time. So it's hard to tell where that's going to hit some sort of a ceiling. But what I'll say is, maybe I'll, because I think about this from my job, from my perspective. And to play off of Eric's point is, I look at this similar to sort of data privacy and GDPR that happened, 10, 12 years ago. Like that was, quite honestly, it was a bit of a mess how that evolved. Europe came up with some standards. California came up with their own standards. And I just hope that doesn't happen here with AI, and we can learn from some of the mistakes of the past and actually get some broader regulations, because it's going to make it will, I care deeply about it as a chief technology officer. I care deeply about innovation and knowing all these different rules. Is it in this state, in that country, in this, like, it becomes really, really hard to navigate that. So I hope we learn from some of the mistakes of the past and do it differently this time and get ahead of it. I don't know that I'm overly optimistic that will happen, but that's my hope that it will.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast where they were talking about kind of the using the analogy of when nuclear warheads started coming out, there's a proliferation, everybody had them, whatever. And it took 15 to 20 years before there were some real rules around, just engagement and whatever, and for everybody to agree. And I think the same thing could probably apply here as well. And they were talking about, that, okay, we need to make sure that there's a person somewhere involved before this action is decided by the AI. Like, okay, somebody fires off some missiles, we're going to respond. The AI says time to fire the missile, but a person needs to step in and kind of turn the key. And I'm like, that already exists. I mean, we already have people, before you got to turn the keys and do all this kind of stuff simultaneously before any of that happens. So anyway,
Steve, I'm still worried that just my emails will be sent automatically. I haven't thought about the missiles yet. So
I don't think anybody's going to get too upset about that unless it's a flaming email. But I guess that could,
people have ruined careers on emails.
No kidding.
Sure.
All right, guys, well, we got to wrap this up. So anyway, thanks for your time. Eric, really appreciate you getting up early in the morning and doing this. Ken, thanks for all your insights. Really good stuff. I think we've got some good conversation and points, for other folks that are listening in, mostly in the corporate travel space. So thanks a lot. All and right. I guess you guys have a great rest of your day.
All right, take care.
You too. Thanks so much.
Bye, guys.